Have you ever stopped to wonder why you care so much about what others think of you? Why a compliment can change your entire mood? Why criticism from a stranger stings more than it should? Why you hesitate to say what you really think in a group, just in case it's not received well? If any of this sounds familiar, you're not alone. But more importantly, you're not free. Because behind every need to be liked, every desire to impress, every anxious thought about how others perceive you, is something far more dangerous than simple insecurity. It's a silent addiction, one that Carl Jung warned us about, though he didn't call it by the name we use today. Validation. Not the healthy kind, the kind that confirms we exist in the world, that we matter to others. That's normal. But the destructive kind, the one that replaces your inner compass with an audience, the kind that makes you a stranger to your own self. Carl Jung called this state living in the persona, a mask, a character you've created to be accepted, loved, seen, even if it's not who you truly are. Jung believed that each of us begins life with incredible potential, not just one fixed identity, but a collection of traits, instincts, desires, shadows, and dreams that make up the whole self. But then, something happens. We're born into a society, into a family, into expectations. And we learn, quickly, that to be loved, we have to play a role. Don't be too loud. Don't get angry. Be nice. Be smart. Be funny. Don't disappoint. We become performers in someone else's story. And slowly, the real self, the one with contradictions, instincts, power, gets buried. Instead, we build a persona. The persona is a psychological mask. It's not inherently bad. It's what allows us to function in society. But when you forget it's a mask, when you believe it's all you are, you lose contact with your inner truth. You start making decisions not from desire or purpose, but from expectation. And this is where validation begins to control your life. At some point, you stopped asking, "What do I want?" and started asking, "What will they think of me if I do this?" That shift may have been small, invisible even, but it changed everything. Because from that moment, your emotions were no longer yours. Your self-worth depended on the feedback of others. Your identity became reactive, not rooted. This is what Jung feared most. Not that people would become evil, but that they would become lost, that they would mistake approval for authenticity, that they would never meet their true selves. Here's the paradox. The more you chase validation, the more you tell yourself you're not enough without it. Each time you bend your truth to be liked, you chip away at your self-respect. Each time you hide what you really think to avoid conflict, you become more afraid of being real. Each time you need someone's approval to feel good, you give them power over you. And the worst part? Even when you get the validation, the like, the compliment, the praise, it never lasts. Because deep down, you know, they're not liking the real you. They're liking the version of you you've curated for their approval. So instead of feeling seen, you feel even more invisible. Let's go back to where this starts, childhood. As children, our survival depends on the approval of others. We need love, protection, attention, and we learn fast which behaviors win us those things. Maybe your parents praised you when you succeeded and withdrew affection when you failed. Maybe they taught you, directly or indirectly, that your anger was unacceptable, your sadness inconvenient, your curiosity annoying. So you adjusted. You became what they needed you to be. Polite, pleasant, easy, obedient. You learned to suppress, distort, or exile parts of yourself, and in return, you got love, but conditional love. Jung wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." But you never got that chance. Instead, you learned to fear rejection more than you desired truth. You learned that validation was safer than authenticity. And by the time you reached adulthood, you were fluent in one thing: performing. Fast forward to today, and now we live in a world designed to exploit that early programming. Social media platforms are validation factories. Every post is a performance. Every like a hit of dopamine. Every share a round of applause. And what happens when a post flops? You feel it in your chest, like you failed, like you weren't enough. But you weren't even being you. You were presenting a version of yourself optimized for clicks, relatability, admiration. And now you're sad about it that it didn't land. Carl Jung never lived to see Instagram, but he understood the psychology perfectly. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. We think we're choosing what we post, how we act, what we wear. But if you dig deeper, you'll find we're choosing based on how others might react. That's not freedom. That's manipulation by ourselves. Jung taught that everything you repress, all the traits you hide to fit in, doesn't go away. It becomes the shadow. If the persona is what you show the world, the shadow is everything you've buried to keep that persona intact. The anger you suppress to seem nice. The sexuality you hide to seem proper. The ambition you downplay to avoid intimidating others. The grief, the jealousy, the fear, the power. The more you try to be liked, the more shadow you create. And here's the tragedy. Most of your authentic power lives in your shadow. Your intensity, your genius, your confidence, your rawness. All the things that could make you real, alive, magnetic, are trapped because you've been taught they're too much. So you seek validation to feel okay, while simultaneously burying the very parts of yourself that could actually make you whole. By now, you might be realizing something. The need for validation is not just annoying. It's dangerous. It doesn't just make you anxious. It erases you. It makes you second-guess your voice. It turns relationships into approval exchanges. It keeps you chasing a version of success defined by other people. And worst of all, it keeps you small. Because as long as you need to be liked, you will never allow yourself to be powerful. You will trade greatness for likability, authenticity for safety, freedom for applause. Ask yourself a question. One Jung might have asked, can you exist without being seen? Can you do something meaningful, even if no one applauds it? Can you express your truth, even if no one agrees? Can you stand in your values, even if you're misunderstood? Can you love who you are, even if nobody notices? Most people can't, because they've built their self-worth on reflection, a hall of mirrors, but mirrors distort. And the only thing that sees you clearly is the part of you you've neglected the most, yourself. Jung taught that real healing begins not by adding more to the self, more likes, more praise, more achievement, but by subtracting what is false, peeling back the persona, reclaiming the shadow, and remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. If you've made it this far, something in you is already shifting. You're starting to see the game. You're starting to realize that needing validation is not a flaw. It's a learned survival mechanism, one that made sense once. But now it's a prison. And the key is not to get rid of validation entirely. We all need to feel seen, appreciated, loved. The key is to stop needing it to define you, to reclaim your internal compass, to know your truth even when no one claps, to be rooted in self-worth that doesn't need a mirror. This is the beginning of individuation, Jung's word for the journey back to the true self. The process of becoming whole. Not perfect, not approved. Whole. Most people walk around believing they're independent, that they think for themselves, that their values, beliefs, and goals are their own. But Carl Jung saw through that illusion. He understood that unless you've done deep inner work, unless you've made the unconscious conscious, your life is not really your own. It's a patchwork of expectations, roles, reactions, wounds, and unexamined assumptions. And the need for validation? It thrives in the unconscious. It hijacks your decisions without you realizing it. You think you're choosing your career, but really, you're choosing what will make your parents proud. You think you're falling in love, but really, you're choosing the person who mirrors the approval you've always craved. You think you're setting goals, but really you're trying to impress a version of society you don't even like. And here's the terrifying part. Most people live their entire lives like this. Not because they're weak, but because they never learned to look beneath the surface. Let's get even more precise. Why does validation feel so good? Because it literally triggers a biochemical reward. When someone praises you, likes your post, agrees with your opinion, your brain releases dopamine, a neurochemical hit that makes you feel pleasure, motivation, safety. The same kind of reward loop seen in gambling and drug use. And over time, you become addicted. Not just to praise, but to avoiding disapproval. Your nervous system begins to associate social rejection with pain, and your behavior shifts automatically, even unconsciously, to avoid it. This is why you hesitate before posting that unpopular opinion, why you avoid hard conversations, why you laugh at jokes you don't find funny, why you overwork just to be told you're doing a great job. This isn't weakness, it's wiring. But that doesn't mean you're doomed, because once you recognize the pattern, you can start to break it. At the root of validation addiction is one core belief. I am only worthy if I succeed, if I please, if I'm nice, if I'm agreeable, if I'm perfect, if I'm liked. This belief doesn't come from nowhere. It's inherited from childhood, culture, religion, school, and even trauma. If you were raised in an environment where love had to be earned, through obedience, performance, or silence, you learned that your worth was conditional. And conditional worth always creates hunger. A hunger for validation that never gets satisfied. Because no matter how much you're praised, the belief stays, I'm not enough unless. Jung wrote, shame is a soul-eating emotion. And this is exactly what validation addiction is built on. The shame of not being inherently worthy. The shame of being too much or not enough. The shame of your true self. So you trade authenticity for approval. Because shame whispers, if they saw the real you, they'd leave. Let's talk about how this plays out in relationships. When you crave validation, love becomes conditional performance. You say what your partner wants to hear, not what you feel. You hide your pain so you won't be a burden. You change yourself to keep the peace. You bend, shrink, please, smile, all to avoid rejection. And sometimes you don't even realize you're doing it. You think you're being a good partner, but really, you're afraid of being abandoned. The result? You're never truly known, because you never let yourself be seen. And even if the relationship works, it leaves you feeling alone, because deep down, you know, they don't love the real you. They love the version of you that always seeks their approval. Jung would say that until you confront the parts of yourself you've hidden for love, you'll never experience real connection, only performance. Modern culture doesn't just tolerate validation addiction, it profits from it. Everything around you is engineered to trigger insecurity and then sell you the solution. You feel not good enough? Buy this product. You feel invisible? Post on this platform. You feel unloved? Sign up for this app. You feel irrelevant? Go viral. But none of these things address the root. They only feed the hunger, because the momentary validation fades, and the wound is still there. The algorithm doesn't care if you're fulfilled. It cares if you're engaged. And the fastest way to keep someone engaged is to keep them chasing validation. So you keep scrolling, keep posting, keep comparing, keep performing. And with every act, you drift further from your real self. Carl Jung warned us that mass-mindedness, being absorbed into collective identity, is the death of the individual soul. And that's exactly what the validation economy creates. Mass behavior, mass approval, mass identity, and no self. Here's a disturbing truth. Even positive feedback can become a prison. You get praised for being calm, so you suppress your anger. You get praised for being helpful, so you stop setting boundaries. You get praised for being successful, so you never admit you're unhappy. You become addicted to a specific image of yourself and trapped by the expectation to maintain it. And over time, the parts of you that don't fit that image die. Carl Jung taught that the goal of life is not to be good, it is to be whole. And that means making space for contradiction, for light and dark, for confidence and doubt, for strength and softness, for rage and grace. But validation teaches you to be one thing only, what others want. So you amputate everything else. Even the spiritual path is not immune. Some people seek validation through enlightenment. They want to be above others, seen as wise, kind, peaceful. But this too is a mask. If you're meditating just to feel superior, if you're helping others to be admired, if you're healing yourself so you can be liked as a healed person, you're still in the grip of validation. You've just changed costumes. Carl Jung warned that the ego is incredibly sneaky. It will use even your quest for authenticity as a way to feel important. So you start to perform your spirituality. You speak softly, smile constantly, post about growth. But deep inside, you're still desperate to be liked. You're still seeking validation, just with fancier words. That's not transcendence. That's ego cosplay. Let's face the core of it. Why do we need to be liked? Because being liked feels like safety. It means we're not at risk of being rejected, abandoned, judged, alone. But the truth is, the need to be liked is the fear of being free. Because freedom means not everyone will like you. Freedom means making choices others won't understand. Freedom means standing in truth even when it's uncomfortable. Freedom means risking being misunderstood or even disliked to stay real. Jung understood that individuation, becoming whole, often requires social friction. You might lose some approval. You might confuse others. You might disappoint people who only loved your mask. But what you gain is worth it. You. Let's get practical. Here are some questions. Answer them honestly. Do you check your phone compulsively after posting something, waiting for likes? Do you feel anxious when someone disagrees with you? Do you shape your opinions based on the crowd you're with? Do you downplay your success so others won't feel uncomfortable? Do you avoid conflict even when your boundaries are violated? Do you feel worthless when you're not being praised? Do you crave approval from certain people more than others? Bosses, mentors, influencers? Do you feel empty when you're alone, without an audience? If you said yes to most of these, it doesn't mean you're broken. It means you've been trained to live outside yourself. And the first step in breaking the pattern is seeing it. You can't heal what you won't name. Now that we've exposed the pattern, now that you see how validation controls you, distorts you, fragments you, the question is, how do you break free? How do you build a self that doesn't rely on being liked? How do you face disapproval and still feel whole? How do you reclaim the parts of you you've buried for applause? In the next section, we'll explore Carl Jung's model of individuation, how to integrate your shadow, how to break your dependency on praise, how to replace external approval with internal truth. Because true power isn't being admired, it's being sovereign. And that's what comes next. The crisis of the false self. You've spent years, maybe decades, shaping a version of yourself that the world would applaud. You learned the tone of voice that earns approval, the opinions that won't stir conflict, the goals that earn admiration, even if they were never yours. But now something feels wrong, like you're a guest in your own life, performing instead of living. Carl Jung called this life led by approval a tragedy of unconscious identity. You're no longer living from the self, the center of your psychological and spiritual truth. You're living from the persona, a mask crafted for validation. The persona is useful, necessary even, but only when you control it. When the mask controls you, when it becomes your only face, you become hollow. And here's the worst part. You don't notice it at first, because being liked feels good. It's only later, when your relationships feel shallow, when your goals feel lifeless, when your inner world starts to collapse, that you realize you've built your life on other people's expectations. Why is validation so powerful? Because it taps directly into your brain's reward system. Every like on social media, every compliment, every nod of approval, it activates dopamine, a biological reinforcement. It tells your nervous system, yes, do that again. And so you do. You say what's acceptable. You think what's popular. You hide what's inconvenient. You polish your image, not to reflect your inner reality, but to maintain external approval. And soon you're no longer living. You're branding. You become a product. Carl Jung would argue this is where individuation, the journey to becoming your true self, dies. Not from trauma, not from tragedy, but from subtle conformity. You've become a slave, not to a tyrant, but to applause. Jung's concept of individuation is the core of his psychology and the antidote to validation addiction. It's the process of confronting all parts of your psyche, even the ones you've rejected, ignored, or hidden, and integrating them into a whole. But individuation is uncomfortable. It requires saying things that people won't like. It means no longer pleasing everyone. It means being misunderstood, And that's exactly why most people avoid it. Because most people don't want truth. They want comfort. And validation is the most comforting lie of all. To individuate, you must confront your shadow, the parts of yourself you've denied to gain acceptance. That might be your anger, your ambition, your sexuality, your creativity, your independence, your assertiveness, parts that didn't fit into the persona you built. So you buried them. But anything you bury doesn't disappear. It festers. And eventually, it sabotages your life. It appears in anxiety, depression, explosive emotions, and failed relationships. Jung believed that the shadow isn't evil. It's simply unlived life. If you want to stop being manipulated by your need for validation, you have to reclaim the parts of yourself that you gave up to be liked. Only then will you be whole. Only then can you live with integrity, not performance. Here are some questions to ask yourself. Do I say yes when I really want to say no? Do I adjust my personality depending on who I'm around? Do I feel anxious when someone disapproves of me? Do I seek out people who constantly reassure me I'm doing okay? Do I feel hollow after getting praise or recognition, as if it wasn't really for me? Do I avoid expressing unpopular opinions even when I believe them? If you answered a yes to most of those, you're still in the loop. But now that you can see it, you can begin to break it. Let's be clear. You can't cure your need for validation. It's wired into you as a social being. But you can unhook from it. You can rewire your relationship to it. Here's how. 1. Create emotional distance from praise. When someone compliments you, pause. Don't rush to internalize it. Observe it like you would a passing cloud. Ask, does this praise reflect something I value, or just something they prefer? If the answer is the latter, let it go. 2. Begin saying no. Say no to things that don't align with your values, even when it disappoints people, even when it makes them uncomfortable. You'll feel guilt at first, and that's okay. That's the withdrawal symptom of approval addiction. Let it burn, because on the other side is something rare and powerful. Sovereignty. 3. Do something without telling anyone. Post nothing. Share nothing. Seek no applause. Just do something meaningful, challenging, or creative in private. If it feels empty without an audience, that's a clue. You were doing it for validation, not meaning. This practice retrains your brain to find value in experience itself, not applause. 4. Write a shadow journal. Every day, write what you really think, without censoring. What angers you, what you envy, what you fear, what you desire. This raw honesty is how you begin to reclaim the parts of yourself you've buried to be accepted. Don't judge, don't edit, just write. 5. Set one boundary. This week, pick one person, one situation, where you often bend or silence yourself to avoid rejection. Set a boundary. Say the uncomfortable thing. You'll feel resistance, fear, guilt, doubt. But do it anyway. And then observe something powerful. You didn't die. You didn't dissolve. You survived and became stronger. This is emotional strength. This is individuation in action. People think freedom is rebellion, a middle finger to the world. But real freedom is silent. It's the ability to be at peace with yourself, even when others disapprove. Even when you aren't liked, even when you are misunderstood. Jung would say this is the beginning of psychological maturity, when you no longer need to be seen to feel real. You were not born to perform. You were not born to win approval. You were not born to conform to someone else's blueprint. You were born to discover something no one else can, yourself. And the self does not beg to be liked. It does not fear disapproval. It does not ask for permission. It simply is. The need for validation may always whisper in your ear, but you don't have to listen. You can choose something quieter, something deeper, something true. And that is what Jung called individuation, the path of the courageous, the path of the few, the path back to yourself. So I ask you, are you living for yourself or for applause? Let me know in the comments. What part of this resonated with you the most? Have you felt trapped by the need for validation? And if so, how are you starting to break free? Share your story, not to be liked, but to be real. And if this video helped you see yourself more clearly, subscribe, because this journey is just beginning. See you in the next video.